And that's what I tell the pastors is like, you got to have something that makes you excited to wake up every morning. Otherwise, you are not going to let go at the time that this church needs you to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to convince yourself that you don't need to let go and that if you just hang on a little bit longer, things will be better.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the LeadingSmart Podcast, Season 3, Leading in Real Time. Tim is in Canada right
I
now.
am. Crossed the border this morning. They did not stop me. I did feel like this guy at the border because I drove across. I felt like when he looked at me, I thought he knows about that thing I stole in 5th grade. Like he was peering into my soul. And I thought he's gonna stop me and interrogate me. I'm gonna be in handcuffs because he can see everything that I've ever done. It kind of felt that way.
Okay, well, this is a fun can of worms. What was the thing you stole in 5th grade?
I didn't, but I mean, I don't remember, but I'm sure I did. So I was just like, this guy can see everything I've ever done. It's like when when you're little and you're afraid of God. It's like it felt like that because his eyes were so piercing. He didn't smile at all. And here's the thing. He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to visit some friends." He said, "Who are you visiting?" I said, "Mike and Corinne, who are the pastors at the church we work with." And he said, "Are you going to preach at Southside?" And
No.
yes. And
He said that?
I said, "Wait, you know Mike and Corinne?" And he said, "They married me." Or he said, "Mike married me."
That
Uh,
is so
but
cool.
nothing changed in his demeanor. He was still staring into my soul like I was the guiltiest person on the planet. So it didn't give me any credit.
Did you send Mike and Corinne a voice
I
memo?
did. I did.
Did they know who you were talking about,
No,
probably?
I don't think so. And he wasn't about to give me his name. So
Yeah. Oh, wow. That is so bizarre.
I don't.
That's so funny. Man. Well, I bet inside he had all sorts of warm and fuzzies. You just didn't see it on his border patrol demeanor at the time. Sounds like he was great at his job.
He was great. I could be him because people tell me that my warm fuzzy doesn't always translate to my face.
Yeah.
So maybe I could do that if this thing doesn't work out.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. All right. Well, today we are going to, oh, sorry, one more thing. I wanted to say you and I were at Exponential Conference together last week. Well, I guess maybe 2 weeks ago at the time people will be listening to this. And that was so fun. We got to catch up with so many friends. We got to see several of our folks that come to our gatherings or that are just a part of our Leading Smart tribe in some way that came to our sessions. And we also heard lots of fun feedback on the podcast. I guess no one's going to come up and tell us if they don't
Horrible.
enjoy our
Yeah.
podcast, but we sure did get to hear from folks that do enjoy the podcast. And that was fun.
You know who else I heard from about our podcast this week?
Your mom.
My mom. So my mom said when you and I kind of like go back and forth on like how different we are, she said she usually agrees with you, not with me.
Yes. I knew that I loved Mrs. Stevens.
I've been her son for 58 years and I still can't, like get her to pull over to my side. So what am I going to do?
Oh man. I see you, Mrs. Stevens. Thank you. Yes. I get you.
Did she get you?
Oh, it's so funny. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about 4 different categories that we see when churches are facing succession or thinking about succession. So we typically when I get a call booked on my calendar, or you get an email or a text message, these are the 4 different categories that we feel like, okay, if we could bucket these things, these are the 4 different buckets that we would have. And succession is one of those things I feel like this is the analogy that's coming to my brain. It's kinda like a colonoscopy.
Oh, wow.
Ooh, even though I have
Okay.
not had that, I'm not at that stage of life yet. Feel
Oh,
free to share if
thanks.
you would like.
Thanks to throw shade on me. Wow. This is starting good.
But yeah, it's like one of those things that you don't wanna think about until you have to, and we at Leading Smart would like to change that and say, "Hey, let's look
Wow.
at this as more proactive, as helpful, as, being more on the offense rather than the defense," because we do also get the call when it's an emergency and we want to be able to help you have a plan before it's an emergency. So, 4 different buckets, Tim. The first one that we came up with was when there is a longtime founding pastor who's been in the seat. So tell us about this one.
Yes. And this is I would guess this is maybe 50% of the churches that we talk to and or are currently doing succession work with is a founding pastor who's now, and maybe I'm working with one right now where the founding pastor founded it in mid 40s. I worked with one in his mid 40s, and now that was like 23 years ago. And I worked with one a few years back where the pastor had been there 46 years, founded it
Wow.
46 years prior in his early 20s. So all kinds of things. And yeah, typically, most of the time, the conversation around a church where it's a founding pastor, conversation starts with the founding pastor because most often we call it a founders board that is typically usually a longtime board as well that maybe they don't do rotations off. They've been there for a long time. They're going to let that founder go first. They're not going to usually bring up that conversation. They're going to let that pastor bring it up. And so often it's the pastor who's reaching out to us for those conversations.
Yeah. Sorry, I started smiling because I was just thinking about your mom and how she agrees with me.
Wow. You're going to live with that one for a while.
I know, I'm so pleased. So that brought me so much joy.
That's
Okay, so that's really interesting too that it's usually being brought up by the founding pastor, which makes sense because I would imagine that the folks around them are a little scared to bring that up because it's especially in that founding pastor seat. Not only are you positioned as like the authority figure from a hierarchical org chart perspective, but they've also been, in my experience with founding pastor churches, they've been like the spiritual guide of a lot of the folks who are on their board or on staff. And so to imagine going to that person who has so much influence and authority in your life and saying, "Hey, have you thought about succession?" It would be
It's so
scary.
true because that pastor invited everyone that's there into the story of that church. I remember like my dad would joke, like when he was like joking mad, he'd say, "I brought you into this world. I'll take you out of this world." And you
Mhm.
think about that with the pastor, it's like I like you didn't hire me, like the founding pastor. No one hired him. He was there before any of them were there. So the sense that then the people that came after are going to be like, oh, it's time for you. We need to find pastor. It's just not that typically doesn't happen unless that pastor has laid the groundwork for those conversations to happen in a not awkward way over the years. But those are and a lot of those conversations are helping the pastor just determine if the time is right because it's a super vulnerable thing to verbalize and to say and it feels laden with risk because it feels as soon as you bring it up and say you're thinking about it, you're going to lose control of the narrative and the timing and maybe the how. Also, probably more often than the other categories we're going to talk about, at least two of the other categories, more often the founding pastor is not going to move.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, they're
pastors that
so
have been there
rooted.
10 years, they might go back to where they came from, but a pastor who has been there for 30 or 40 years, they're so rooted. Unless so we're working with one right now where his grandkids are, in other places, and so he's gonna move to be close to grandkids. But a lot of times they're gonna stay in the community that's where they're rooted. A lot of times their kids and grandkids go to the church and they're not gonna go anywhere, which is something we
Mhm.
have to work on together to make sure that that works well for the church and doesn't become a problem.
Yeah. All right, so that's the first one, long-term founding pastor. The second one is just a longtime pastor in general. So somebody who didn't found the church, but has been there for a long time. The other thing that's coming to mind in this category, Tim, that I feel like would fit in here would be like a turnaround pastor. So would you put the turnaround pastor who's been there a long time, would you put them more in the founding pastor category, even though they technically didn't found it? But if they revitalized it, turned it around, and now it's like a whole different church, would
Yeah.
you put them more in that one or in the longtime pastor category?
Yeah, I would be asking a lot of questions, and then so if they really did like the church was 300 and dying and had been dying for 20 years, and then Pastor Jake comes in, and 20 years ago, and now the church is 3,000. He's pretty much a founding pastor. I mean, pretty much he founded the current version of the church. But there's a lot of guys a lot of pastors that come in, and we're working with one right now. He's been there 19 years or close to 19, I think, maybe going on 18 right now. But he had three pastorates before that. He came in his mid 50s, early to mid 50s. Oftentimes, what's unique about these is many times it's the board that is going to could be the board or the pastor that's going to engage the conversation. And there's not as much. I shouldn't I shouldn't say a lot. There's not as much relative to founding pastors. There's not as much emotion and identity oftentimes in it because they've been other places and this is just their latest run and maybe they've been there 10 or 15 or 20 years, but they've seen it as they typically that pastor sees it as a phase in their life and they know there's going to be another phase coming. Whereas
Yeah.
founding pastors often they never had a thought about what was going to happen after. This is
Mhm.
just their life.
Yeah, that makes sense. Who is usually initiating in your experience in the longtime pastor? Who's usually initiating that one? The pastor or the board or
I would say 50-50.
that was gonna be my guess too.
Yeah, I would say and when I say the board initiates it, we're not getting calls where the board is like, "Hey, we don't know how to bring it up to our pastor." So it's not like they're trying to like, say,
Yeah.
"Hey, come talk to our pastor and tell him he needs to leave." But they're initiating the conversation with the pastor or the pastor's initiating it with the board, and then we're getting a call after that to come in and kinda walk them through it.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, number 3 is board initiated succession. So great segue. I didn't do that on purpose, but great segue talking about the
Yeah.
board initiated succession.
So this is different than the category we just talked about. This would be when the board is feeling the sense that a change is needed and the pastor is not ready for that. And the board says, hey, we're going to do that anyway. Met with a church a month ago or so, and they just kind of recounted the story. And that was with the founding pastor, but the story where the board kind of stepped in and said, because the senior pastor, the founding pastor just kept kind of kicking it down 1 more year, 2 more years, 5 more years, 2 more years. And the board kind of stepped in and said, it is happening now and we need to move ahead and kind of like you can figure out how but it's happening now. So those come in a variety of ways. Those are hard, right? Because the pastor's not ready to leave. We're working with another one that they've only been there 4 or 5 years, but it's kind of like, you know what, you were great for what we needed for that season, kind of bring back a season of a peace for us, but we need someone different for this next season. And those can be obviously difficult and hard conversations. And there's a lot to navigate there, just like there is with any transition, but even more so, just the delicate communication around that, because the pastor's not going to want to be inauthentic in his communication. The board's not going to be inauthentic, but you also don't want it's not going to help if the board stands up and says, hey, we fired your pastor. Now we got to find someone new. That's usually not going to go well. So just all of the delicacy around the communication and planning around that.
Mhm. Yeah. This is another reason why I think it's so important to have in the bylaws to have a section that brings up succession on at least an annual basis so that it doesn't feel like a gotcha moment when the pastor is approached by the board to say, hey, it's time for us to talk about this. But it's already in there that this is just a thing that we do as a part of the governing body of this organization. It's not personal. It's not, this is not weird. It's just a part of what we do because it's our responsibility to do that as the board. So,
So
yeah.
true, Holly. When we work with churches on redoing their board governance, and I was just working on this last night with the church, we put in there an annual review of the succession, and it's just to normalize it. And they're like, our pastor's only 28. Exactly. You don't know how long your pastor's going to live. The proverbial bus may catch up with him. So it's not, it's emergency, but it's partly that reason. It's like, okay, if suddenly our pastor does get hit by the bus and the bus wins, what would he or she have suggested that we do next? And so you just have
Mhm.
a conversation once a year. So, Pastor Joe can say, you know what, if something happened to me tomorrow, I would suggest you maybe raise up Eric on our team as an interim and then you do a search. Or I would suggest you take our student pastor and he needs a couple years. So, come around him and then he could become the lead pastor, whatever. Like just have that conversation once a year to normalize it. I think it's for the emergency. It's also just because then when you're 58 or 60 or 62 or 72 and the board wants to have a conversation about, you've been talking about it once a year for forever. So it's just a normal.
Yes. That's so good. And that actually is a great segue to our fourth bucket, which is proactive planning. So let me do a quick recap. Make sure we all can, there's a little bit of overlap with all of them, but the first one is the longtime founding pastor. Second category is the longtime pastor. Third category is the board initiated succession. And then this fourth one is proactive planning. So this is just kind of what we've talked about, where a church who wants to make sure that they're prioritizing health and longevity. So what do we need to do to make sure that even if this is 10 years out, that we are ahead of it and that we are proactively planning for this because we know that it's that important.
Yeah, I sat with a year ago, I sat with a pastor and his wife. They're both there. And he said, this guy's 55. He was 55 a year ago. And he said, what do I need to do? He says, probably when I'm 65, I think I want to hand this thing off or turn this thing over. He is a founder. And I said to him, what are you doing outside of here? We're sitting at the church. What are you doing outside of this church? And his wife says, haha, nothing. She just speaks up and like, no, like, I'm like, no hobbies, you don't hunt, you don't fish, you're not into photography, you're not into like, let me go teach at the missions conference once a year, or I love the summer camp and like nothing. And I said, you're not going to hand this thing off in 10 years. I said, I can tell
Yep.
you that unless you find the something. I talked to him this year, a year later, and he's got his thing. He knows what it's going to
Oh,
be.
that's
He's
awesome.
excited about it, and he's still, 9 or 10 years away from, but he's like, I could give the rest of my life to that when I'm done here.
Wow.
But you gotta have that kind of thing, and that's when we don't typically, like, go in and do a lot of heavy consulting with churches that are 10 plus years out from, but we will talk to them on the phone and counsel and consult them, and that's what I tell the pastors is, like, you gotta have something that makes you excited to wake up every morning. Otherwise, you are not gonna let go at the time that this church needs you to let go,
Mhm.
and you're gonna convince yourself that you don't need to let go, and that if you just hang on a little bit longer, things will be better, and you also aren't gonna be listening really well because of the fear that is ingrained with either, "I don't know how I'm gonna survive financially," or, "I just don't know what I'm gonna do." Like, I just don't know
Yeah.
what I'm gonna do. And there's a lot of fear around that, and that fear will cause you to hang on longer than you should.
Yeah, it's always finances and identity are the 2 things that hold succession back, and finances is not that it's easy, but it's a lot easier than
Solvable.
identity.
Yeah.
Solvable, that's a better word, yes. Because even if the church doesn't have the money, we can figure out a plan to go find it or etcetera. But the identity piece is really up to that outgoing pastor to do the work to figure out, okay, what is it that I can look forward to rather than feeling like I'm leaving something behind? Can you share without giving up like who the pastor was, of course, but like I'm just curious for people who are listening because I imagine I know that resonated with me. Like I think about that all the time. Like I don't have a ton of hobbies and stuff. I always every year I'm like I should get more hobbies. But I'm sure a lot of people who are listening were like, "Oh, that's I'm in that category. Like all I do is my church stuff." So yeah, what was it that he found?
So this I'm gonna try to say it without giving too much away, but this person has their undergrad in something besides theology and Bible and church, and have always, like, stayed interested in that, so they're kinda, like, toying with a mission as business or business as mission, I can't remember how you say that, with this industry that he is super smart in and has a lot of training in, and their churches are as actually doing a lot of work around that area, and so he's like, "Man, I would just, like, let the church kinda go on, and I would kinda take this part of what our church is already doing," and they're toying with taking this thing national, and he's like, "Man, I could just pour myself into that, and it would be amazing."
That is so cool. I love that. Yeah, I just thought maybe it might spark some ideas for folks that are thinking, "Oh, that's me." And I like your challenge of 10 years because we hear that all the time. 10 years is so far away. I don't need to think about it yet, but it's imagine, yeah, it would take that long to if you are literally starting from scratch, not excited about anything other than what you're doing today to do the work to figure that out. So, that's awesome. Okay, well, those were our 4 categories: long term founding pastor, long term pastor, board initiated succession, and then proactive planning succession. If succession is top of mind for you, or you've heard something today that's challenged your thinking, like how important it is to make sure you're thinking about finances and identity, even if it's 10 years out, we have 3 resources for you. The first is check out season 1 of the Leading Smart podcast. If you scroll all the way back to almost a year ago, I think it was May of 2025 when we launched that season. It's 12 episodes all about succession. So that would be a great starting point for you. The second one is we have a succession ebook. So if you go to leadingsmart.com, click on resources at the top, and then there is a succession ebook there that you can download that is a great thing for you to go through yourself, or if you're on a board or with your leadership team, just to start the conversation there. And then we are actually having a live call it a call, a webinar on April 28th at 11 o'clock Central Time because we do so much work around succession. We get so many questions about it. So Tim and I are making ourselves available we're going to have 10 things that we believe every church should consider for pastoral succession, but there will also be lots of time for Q&A. You can even be anonymous. So if you're like, I don't want to put my name on a webinar, that we're not going to do cameras or anything, but people will see your name. So just put a fake name in there, like Google Docs, anonymous meerkat or something. And we would love to have you. So you can register for that at leadingsmart.com/podcast. And there is a banner on there that you can click and sign up for that webinar.
Maybe something too. I know probably most of our listeners are people who work at churches, pastors, directors, leaders at churches. That's something, pass this along to your board. If you're kind of in that conversation now, and have them join us on the webinar and just see what they can learn and take away from it.
Yeah, totally.
And Holly, you said there's 3 resources.
Oh, yeah? What's the fourth one?
It's the ebook, the webinar. The 4th one is book a call with Holly, and
Oh,
she would
yeah,
love
that's true.
to talk to your team or talk with you or your team about anything related. If anything in this resonated and like, oh, I'd love to hear more about that, book a call with Holly, and she has the connection to our entire team. So if she can't answer your question, we'll find someone who can, and be glad to help you.
Yeah, totally. And you can do that at leadingsmart.com, click on Let's Talk, and that is a link to my calendar. So if you just want to say hello, you want to talk about succession, you want to talk about Tim, I don't know. We can, lots of things.
That's the difference between you and me, Holly. That's why you take those calls. Because if someone called me and says, "I just want to say hi," you'd be delighted. I'd be like, "Really?"
That's so true. So true. All
That's why
right.
my
Are you
mom
ready?
likes you.
What'd you say?
That's why my mom likes you so much.
That's right. Ah, warms my heart.
Yes.
Okay. Are you ready for a fun segment today?
Sure. Let's do it.
It's not really, this won't be like super surprise for you, but for our listeners, it might be an interesting conversation. So we had our virtual coaching cohort earlier today, like literally 2 hours ago. So this is the fourth Monday of every month. We gather executive pastors. And today we got to hear from Dan Vanderwall at 12 Stone Church. It was amazing. I feel like it was a master class on leadership development and multi-site strategy. But anyway, I always have an icebreaker at the beginning. And my question today was, you have to choose for the rest of your life. Would you rather have a private chef that cooks all your meals or a housekeeper that makes sure that your house is in order and clean? And you cannot, the house cleaner cannot cook your meals. That's the rule. So, Tim, what did you say?
Well, my answer was I wanted more options.
Yeah, which is not an option.
I wanted like a full-time handyman or person. I wanted like a landscaper, but those weren't options. So sticking with the options. So yeah, I've thought about it a little bit more since then. So I would answer it different being single versus being married to my lovely wife, Faith, because I kind of already have a full-time chef that fixes all my meals when I'm home. She's amazing. And if she's not there, I have a microwave and I can do wonders with that microwave. So, and we did invest years and years and years ago with monthly, I think it's monthly, maybe every 3 weeks, housekeeper who comes in and helps us clean the house. So that is a choice we made and that we love. And we're not like foodies. So
Hmm.
when you say chef, I think, fancy food, and that would just probably not do it for us.
Hmm. So you didn't answer the question though.
Cleaner, house cleaner.
Oh, house. Okay, you're saying
Yep.
that you already have invested in that, and that's what you
Yep.
would do. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, mine would be a house cleaner for sure. Because similarly, I'm married to a wonderful chef. He is phenomenal and enjoys it as well. Elliot loves cooking and he's really good at it. And so our arrangement is he does the cooking and I do the dishes, and it is a great team. Very spoiled.
That's funny. And this question came up because when we first started talking before our last call, your house cleaner walked behind you in the
Yeah,
video screen.
I know. I was like, yep.
There she is. Everyone say hi.
Oh, so grateful for her. Oh man, seriously, those are my favorite days. Like that feeling, Elliot makes so much fun of me because every single time it's like, she comes every 2 weeks and I get into bed and those clean sheets, like the bed is perfectly made because the bed does not get made at the Tate household unless Rena makes it. So, do y'all make your bed every day?
My wife makes our bed every day.
That's awesome. I
She's awesome.
want to, like in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, it would take like 2 seconds, but it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yep.
But
Yeah, here
anyway,
you go.
that feeling of getting into bed, like clean sheets and a like perfectly made bed. There is nothing like it. It brings me so much joy. So much
That's
joy.
called a hotel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Oh, but that's what's interesting is I don't get necessarily that same feeling at a hotel though. So what is that? There's gotta be some psychology
Well,
there.
because it's your own bed. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no place like your own bed.
And maybe it's like the just gratitude that I feel of like someone else has done this for me. Whereas if it's at a hotel, like I'm expecting, like I am, pay whereas like it's like, oh, this is so special because this is such a privilege and a joy to be able to experience this. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know. All right, you guys, thanks for listening today. And yeah, join us April 28th at our live webinar where we're going to be talking about the 10 things every church should consider for pastoral succession. And you can find everything at leadingsmart.com. All right, Tim, safe travels in Canada.
All right. See y'all next week.